We're watching the breakouts. Like I said, they're about 2 miles up from the front on the north side. We're watching those very closely because it's possible that those could become the new forward advancing fronts or flows. Obviously, it would mean that the flows might be moving in a different direction and possibly affecting other residents or other parts of the community. So we're watching those very closely right now. As I shared yesterday, what they reported to me from the aircraft this morning was that it remains fairly shallow as far as the depth or height of that pad, and it's only burning on the edges. And estimated advancement, we'll get a more accurate figure from the GPS coordinates, but from the air it appears to be about 50 to 75 yards it advanced since yesterday morning. So very slow moving, but active up there.
Okay, so when you speak to the two significant breakouts that you're monitoring, those are both Malka of Upon Street and Malka of the transfer station?
That's correct. And when I say significant, it's in reference to its active and the size. You know, like I said, it's advanced about 50 to 75 yards since yesterday morning, and we would estimate them to be about 50 to 100 yards wide. But they're very shallow, and which means that it hasn't inflated yet. It's not receiving a large portion of the volume there. But we're still in that initial startup of an inflation period, so we'll be, working very closely with HVO, monitoring any activity up there to ensure if it becomes a new forward advancing flow front, that we're tracking it and getting their forecasts as far as what's the likely path and track for that.
But the distances to the transfer station and all those other landmarks we've been talking about are all the same?
Same. It hasn't gotten any closer. It's moving, like I said, more in the northeast, so parallel to Apa'a Street. And in fact, one of the reports this morning, it almost looked like it was more active along the northwest, which would give an appearance that it's moving uphill. But what they couldn't see from the air this morning because of the rain was whether or not there's a slight depression on the ground that's causing it to pull in a more westward direction.
So these two other significant breakouts, these are separate from the one that was inching closer to the fence line within about 25 yards of the transfer station?
That's correct. These are at least a quarter to half a mile above that area.
And then, so the front is still 100, is it 100 yards back from that resident or 100 feet back? It hasn't...
Right, that resident up on the top corner, no activity there. It hasn't advanced any closer. So yes, as of yesterday, if you recall, originally we had portion of the flow came within 100 feet of that resident, stopped. And we had another breakout just above that got within 100 yards of the residence and has stopped. So it remains between 75 and 100 yards from that resident, and no activity this morning when they flew over.
You mentioned yesterday that the front was cool, relatively cool. Do you have any idea what that temperature is?
You could touch it without any sense of warmth this morning. I'll try to this afternoon at the 3 o'clock provide you with, again, images. I can show you that we actually have a ribbon that HBO had put there, a marker, showing 90 meters, which was a gauge from the 29th, and it's still standing in the same location and no movement whatsoever of that rock mass towards that ribbon. So it's been fairly quiet and still since the 29th.
As far as people trying to come in and see the lobby here, you guys still having problems? Maybe an update on the person that was posing as a damage assessment agent. Any update to that?
Well, fortunately, with that particular incident, we were able to, through the police's investigation, determine there might have been some communication issues or breakdowns. It wasn't within the secured area. Initially, and I don't know if it was a language barrier or something else, but there was some report that it was within the road-blocked area. It actually turns out it was in a different subdivision within the community. Their investigation continues. They take it very seriously if anyone is out there posing as government officials, but nothing has led to any further other than the investigation is still ongoing.
It's still seeing, I guess, a lot of people still coming up and being turned away. And I noticed about 4 or 5 cars.
Right.
I was at one of the roadblocks.
And right now, one other thing we're sharing with the residents is, or people wanting to see, there's nothing to see currently here at the flow front. All the activity, again, is back above Apa'a Street in the state property, again, secured area, restricted access. And at some point, if this was to continue and play out, we'll be working together to provide some form of viewing or managed access to it. But again, we're trying to maintain the security and safety for everyone. And so far, it's been working out real well. Overwhelmingly, I don't think we've had that many problems or issues. And again, it's thanks to you folks getting the word out and the community supporting the roadblocks and supporting our position with keeping it safe and secure.
Since there's no real movement at the front of the line, is it getting wider? And I mean, and how much wider? What's the width we're talking about with breakouts?
Yes, as I mentioned yesterday, with that ribbon that came down, it was widening on the north side, so extended the width. We'll try to get you a more accurate estimate from my just visual looking across. In some areas, it goes from right behind the flow front at about 50 yards wide to further upslope in over 100 yards wide. So if you can picture, it's kind of a tapering towards the front, working its way back, gets wider and wider. And if you go further upslope, above Upper Street, it can be in excess of 500 yards wide. So it just depends how the topography and what breaks out along the edges or the margins, and how further widen it pulls out and extends the width of the flow.
As it comes out, is there maybe a projected path you guys are looking at that it could go? You said it's running parallel to Paha Street. I guess, is there any, something you're looking at to maybe project where this could move for residents of the area?
If you've seen the maps that HVO uses a lot to help educate all of us on their forecast anticipated movement, within the maps they have these lines of steepest descent, blue lines on the map that kind of show where the flow is likely to follow based on topography. Given where it's pulling out right now or breaking out right now, it's likely that it would enter into another one of those steepest lines of descent and come back towards the east and move down slope. It's also possible that it'll just run parallel to the current flow and then join the current flow, which means it'll get wider but still follow that same basic path or track down slope.
And then once again, I guess, could you talk about how unpredictable it can be? I know, it's been going on for a few months now, and it kind of slows down and maybe picks up. Is there a possibility that the front of the flow here could pick up again and start moving?
Yes, that's possible. And again, what HVO would probably, how they'd explain it is that the tube system or the supply system is still active because we're seeing breakouts on the front. So lava is making its way all the way down to the front. Where it weakens or is weak enough to break out and then extend, that just depends as it's inflating where you might have that fracture or that break on the surface and allow for the oozing to. So yes, it is very unpredictable to say. One thing we can say for sure is that there's no indication that the eruption is going to stop. There's no indication that the flow source and the tube system coming down and the supply has been interrupted or changed, and lava is making its way all the way to the front.
You said the home that's the closest structure, that's still 100 yards away?
Yeah, between 75 and 100 yards. We'll get an accurate measurement this morning. As far as I could see from last night, I didn't see any advancement towards that structure. And when they called in on the aircraft radio this morning, it said it was pretty quiet, no active burning on the edge. So it might have actually stalled right there.
But there still is active behind it?
Behind, right. As through the day, we'll try to get you some photos because I know that helps with the explanation. So.
And then just to speak to, given that election day is tomorrow and you guys have talked about the potential impact, especially when you thought that it was going to have cut Ahor Village by now, just your commitment to ensuring access for the families that live within the barricades, and any message that you'd like to send to folks as they're heading out to the polls? Sure.
Well, even prior to the flow getting as close as it is, so we're talking back as far back as even in August when this became a concern, the election was obviously on the list of issues to prepare for and plan for. So in partnership with our county elections office, contingency plans were already identified that if we were going to have access issues where they would set up additional or alternate polling sites. But given the nature of where we're at today, the election should move forward without any issues related to the lava flow. But if something should change over the next 24 hours, we have contingency plans to ensure access, and the polls will be open to include backup power should power be interrupted. So a lot of contingencies have been put into place to support the election going forward without any issues.
In this period of quiet, is it, you still have to be really diligent, I imagine, because you can't be lulled into, you know what I mean? Talk about that. I mean, it seems very quiet, so do you understaff it, or do you still the same thing, or what?
Well, we try to manage our resources so that we can prepare for the long haul, which is we don't know if this will stop at all. So we have reduced staffing during the evening hours, but we are maintaining people on the ground, just not the numbers that we saw earlier. And that's done in consultation and coordination with HVO. If they, by the close of the day, we're discussing, are there any concerns that we need to be aware of going forward through the night? And if so, which areas do they see would be the problem areas? We focus our resources there, but we constantly have people on the ground walking the flow, especially down in the lower areas nearest to the residents, as well as driving up to Apa'a Street and monitoring any breakouts there. So although we may have reduced the numbers during the night, as we're in the deflation in the lull period, it has not changed anything as far as maintaining a vigilant observation of the flow. So we're on the ground. Yes. Just not the numbers of staff that we would have if it was more active. Again, we're trying to prepare for sustainability of the crews and the resources and not burn everyone out too soon. If nothing else, we'll talk to you folks at 11:30. Thank you.